Hello SGD, Sacred Geometry Decoded. This will be part 4 in the series looking at Hermes Trismegistus and the Corpus Hermeticum, the origin, and looking back in the ancient texts and trying to untangle this web and showing how Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, these early groups which were referred to as Illuminati prior to Adam Weishaupt, the famous Bavarian Illuminati, and how this is all generally related to what's also called Hermeticism. I started to mention Iamblichus on the mysteries of the Egyptians, Chaldeans and Assyrians. In chapter 1 he provides links to Hermes, the god who presides over language, and hence our ancestors dedicated the inventions of their wisdom to this deity, is inscribing all their own writings with the name of Hermes. Very important thing, we'll be getting to that. But Hermes, the god of language, touched on Thoth or Shesset, gods of knowledge, science, geometry, the Quadrivium, botany and medicine. How Hermes is often said to be the literal Thoth, but Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus in these Hermeticists of this famous era, in just prior to and the beginning of the Renaissance, Hermes Mercury, Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus, the gods of knowledge, science, weights and measures in the past. So however, Hermes Trismegistus, where is he coming from? Also, I mentioned the Nuwa and Fu Hsi, compass and square, the gods of knowledge, science, astronomy, teaching, language, and how even their imagery connects so closely to the caduceus of Hermes, which is a similar theme, can be seen in the two snakes of the two rods of Thoth. How this compass and square imagery is very important in the esoteric schools, alchemical, hermetic schools, including the important symbol of Freemasonry. And for instance, the famous image of Rebus, the alchemical wedding, compass and square, and astronomical geometric connections as well. This being just, again, the linking theme. Worth looking into figurism, because I mentioned the Jesuits, and we'll be getting into that more. Imhotep, the famous architect, ancient Egypt, who was then later elevated into god status and the equivalent, or sometimes said to be the literal Thoth. Also, he was a famed healer. Thoth and Shesset, gods of botany and medicine, science, medical science. And the Corpus Hermeticum, amongst its tracts, include to Asclepius, a letter to Asclepius, and of Asclepius to the king. And now we can see, well, who is Asclepius? Asclepius is the god of healing, the Greek god of healing, the son of Apollo. This links, for instance, the Clash of the Titans movie, but if you look into the story regarding Perseus and slaying of Medusa and how that relates to Asclepius, for instance, for Athena told Asclepius that half the blood of Medusa was deadly, the other half gave life and immortality. Asclepius used this blood and started granting immortality, and then, almost Promethean way fell, was doomed from that point. This is a statue of Asclepius on the Sydney University, the medical faculty building, the Stuart Anderson building. Asclepius with a rod and one snake wound about it, the god of healing, medicine, botany. British Medical Association building here in Sydney. You can even see the rod of Asclepius, one snake around the rod. You'll see this connected to pharmacy and etc. Now also on the building, again, the rod of Asclepius. This is a symbol of medicine and healing in various, so these are all from the British Medical Association building. And this is sometimes referred to as the Star of Life, one snake around the rod. Paramedics use this symbol, medicine symbol, the Star of Life, which has the hexagram, star as reflecting the Star of David, and the vesica and flower of life geometry, which again is a consistent theme. We looked at that earlier and saw it in the cathedral in Siena. And also the alternative is the two snakes around the rod, also used by paramedics and doctors, medical science. The rod of Asclepius connected to medicine, the caduceus, the wand or the rod of Hermes, measuring rod, magic wand of oak given to him by Apollo, the father of Asclepius, and how this relates to medical science, gods of knowledge, gods of science. And there's a nice quote by Yaqub ibn Ishaq. He wrote a book on medicine around the time of the House of Wisdom, this important library academy in Baghdad in the early caliphate. treatise on the errors of Damascene physicians. Now he writes, the physician must pay attention to the patient's strength, to the matter of the disease and its duration, for if the strength is weak but the disease matter plentiful and the duration long, then the patient should be offered from the very beginning something which sustains the strength while not increasing the disease matter. And here's the kicker, and there is nothing more appropriate for that than the right amount of chicken broth. So chicken soup, this medicine has been around for a while, but essentially it's the science of weights and measures, the science of medicine being related to the Quadrivium, to alchemy. Amongst the alchemists were the apothecaries, or the early chemists, who were dealing in various chemistry and herbs, such as the apothecary garden in London, famous site as well, where the apothecary guild and the weights and measures connected to apothecary, I've mentioned in other videos, all the lovely numbers all connected in there. But back to Iamblichus on the mysteries of the Egyptians, Chaldeans and Assyrians, and how this relates to Neoplatonism. Iamblichus being a very important mathematician, set up an academy, but also a very important Neoplatonist. Now, for instance, on his title page he mentions Porphyry 230, so Iamblichus 245, 325 at this very chunky period. Essentially all the Hermetic books are essentially traced back to this time. But who was Porphyry? Again, very important Neoplatonist. He wrote a commentary on Ptolemy's Harmonics, which was about math and music theory. He wrote a commentary on Euclid's Elements. Euclid's Elements is still the Bible of geometry. He was also interested in astrology, therefore requiring a knowledge of astronomy. And he also wrote one of the books, biographies on Pythagoras, which was advocating vegetarianism and other Pythagorean principles, and also a vocal proponent of paganism. The Quadrivium: music, arithmetic. Ptolemy's Harmonics, math and music theory. Geometry, Euclid's Elements. Astronomy, astrology, astronomy. Well, astrology is using astronomy to try and predict the future, define things and stuff. So, but you can't really be an astrologer unless you have a knowledge of astronomy. And also Pythagoras, very important in geometric, the Pythagorean theorem, for instance, and also music theory, Pythagorean hammers, and this concept of music theory relating directly to Ptolemy's work on harmonics. But Porphyry was a very important philosopher. So he wrote the Isagoge, a text on logic and philosophy. Was translated into Arabic and Latin, and it remained a standard text on logic into the Middle Ages. Now this would also relate to the House of Wisdom, and how there in Baghdad, especially under Al-Mamun, the famous tunnel into the Great Pyramid, posted recently a video on that, and how the House of Wisdom was collecting ancient Greek, Roman, Chaldean, Indian, and so a lot of like base 10 maths, algorithm, algebra. A lot of these treatises on medicine were either translated and preserved in Arabic at the House of Wisdom, but were also improved upon. And a lot of knowledge, algorithm, algebra, so much of these things so important to modern times. But so this logic and philosophy. And I used this particular one because we have this symbol here on the front page, and that's the symbol of the Jesuits. Now, St. Ignatius of Loyola, founder of the Jesuits, and you see that symbol. And also an important, very, very important person is Athanasius Kircher, 1602 to 1680. Wrote many, many books, but he too was a Jesuit. That's why I mentioned Nuwa and Fu Hsi and Figurism, and how this Jesuit movement in China, they got access to China centuries, like into inland China, not just on the coast at Macau, but they had missions interior of China. Kircher's work full of, so he's a Jesuit, okay, but his works are full of pagan symbolism, and he was into music, geometry, arithmetic, and astronomy. See the 3, 4, 5 triangle. Scala Musica, so his book on music, which includes Doric and Ionian and Phrygian and all these musical nodes. The caduceus, the constellations, the double-headed eagle, the 2 peacocks there as well, and also the There's a tip of my tongue. The at Ephesus there, Temple of Artemis. Okay, Artemis, and notice the hoot hoot, the owl of Bubo, related to Athena as well. So he also includes in his many works a heavy dose of alchemy and chemistry embedded in there as well. So the Quadrivium and also alchemy medicine. I'll put a link in a description to where I go through the geometry, the math embedded in this imagery. And I'll also put a playlist, the Science of the Symbols playlist, because the first, I suppose, 5 episodes are heavily connected to Athanasius Kircher's work and the related Jesuit scholars there at the time. Another important Jesuit was Giovanni Battista Riccioli, the Almagest Novum. So he was into astronomy and into physics. This is one of his works, and again, you see all the eyes. That's Argo, this ancient Greek legend related to Hera and Zeus and Hermes as well, but also what he was publishing on. So we see Ptolemy laying on the floor. Ptolemy, so they've done away with the Ptolemaic model of geocentrism, and he's replaced it with a dual model where it's heliogeocentrism, where some of the planets go around the sun, but some of them orbit the Earth. And this was probably a compromise because, well, it was a dangerous time to be into these things. Now, even at the top here, where we see the Tetragrammaton, but also numerous, mensura, and pondus. So, numbers, measures, and weight. Weights and measures, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy. This is what links all of these people in the Renaissance and back to original times. There's many divergent philosophy ideas, but this is what links them all. Now, in regards to the Illuminati, Illuminatus, Illuminato, we have the Alambrades or Alambrados, members of a French sect which arose 1621. They were very Gnostic in their sense, and it's suspected that Loyola was an Alumbrad before he became a Jesuit, or actually probably kept that in secret, and we can see these same Gnostic symbols, Hermetic symbols, in these other very important Jesuits, as we saw Kircher and stuff. But this is before Bavarian Illuminati. These were the earlier Illuminati, and their similarities to the Neoplatonic schools is very strong. Which brings us back to Porphyry, Neoplatonist, geometrician, music theory, math, astronomy, Pythagorean philosophies as well, and this book, the Isagoge. Now we also have Porphyrian trees, which are called also logic trees or issue trees. This is a Porphyrian tree in a church somewhere, I forget which one, but this is substance. So how do we classify things? And so, for instance, now in biology, is it warm-blooded or is it cold-blooded? If it's not warm-blooded, it cannot be a mammal. Then you can work. Does it have 6 legs? Does it have 8 legs? And this system of division and classification is still very important. Now, for instance, Plato's logic as opposed to Neoplatonic. So Plato famously said, man is a featherless biped. So man is something that walks on 2 legs and is featherless. Diogenes plucked a chicken, dropped it in front of everyone and said, behold, Plato's man. So this is the Greek schools and developments and competitions, but I really like Diogenes, behold a man, and Plato. But amongst many other quotes, my favourite is when Alexander come to visit Diogenes. Diogenes famously said, get out of my son, because he was casting a shadow. And then Alexander the Great said, if I were not Alexander the Great, I would wish to be Diogenes, to which Diogenes replied, if I were not Diogenes, I would also wish to be Diogenes. He's one of these early meme masters as well. This is a Porphyrian tree by Athanasius Kircher. We see the Jesuit academies. Prior to the Dewey Decimal System, this was how they arranged their libraries as well. So now Raymond Lull, I'll get into, okay, so getting the 15-minute mark, but we'll be following on with this in the next episode and all these connections. Cheers, SGD. Have a good one.